Welcome to the Pitching Command Show, brought to you by Command Trakker, the smart target that MLB and D1 teams rely upon to measure and train command. Many throw hard, but few command. Visit commandtracker.com. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, joining today's podcast is my friend Grayson Crawford, New York Yankees AA pitching coach. Welcome, Grayson. I'm thrilled to have you on the show.
Hey, Wayne. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I started this show to promote my Command Trakker Smart Target because everyone was talking only about max velocity. And on this show, we try to focus on all the other things you need to succeed as a pitcher, such as control, command, sequencing, reading batters, mental training, character,
Right.
And so I was talking with Scott Lovecamp, and he suggested it'd be great for the show. So I'm looking forward to this. I've got some series coming up where we talk in detail about reading batters and the sequence planning off of that, and then using command to execute that plan. And I've noticed at the AA level, I think that's where you start seeing more of that, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I think the game planning definitely starts to become a much bigger importance, and obviously to execute a game plan, that's where the command part comes in.
I think as a former catcher, what are some examples of how you read a batter and then you sequence off of that? Like, for example, if a right-handed batter fouls off a slider from a right-handed pitcher to the dugout, or some example like that.
Right. I think, obviously being a former catcher, I know Brad Osmus just talked a little bit about this, about kind of using your eyes and all the time that, he spent behind the plate and being able to kind of use his eyes. And, I think the hitter ultimately will tell you a lot of different things. And, I know one example that I can give just from this season, we were playing a team and we talked a little bit about the first pitch of the at bat would ultimately tell you what he was wanting to do, and if he took a big aggressive swing, then clearly he was showing you that that was the pitch he was going to stay on the whole at bat. If he took it very passively and kind of had no intent to swing whatsoever, you could double that pitch back up, because in his mind, he was just eliminating that pitch altogether. So I think sometimes just letting the takes, letting the foul balls, all of those things kind of tell you the sequence of what is to come, and how we want to approach that guy.
Well, yeah, let's say you're throwing your fastball in and the guy fouls it off to third base. If he's a right-handed batter, that's got to tell you something, as opposed to if the right-handed batter fouled off to the first base side.
Right. Yeah, I think, I definitely think, the timing of that tells you a lot, right? Like, are you on time for it? In order to, what did you actually execute it? That's another piece, right? Like, did you execute that pitch? And that's something I try to get our guys to think about, is even when you don't execute that pitch, it can still have a purpose for the next pitch, and not always thinking about what did I want to do, but what did I actually do? And then inside of that, like, how do we use that pitch in order to play off of the next pitch? And so, I think if a hitter fouls it off to the third base side and he's a right-handed hitter, then obviously he was ready for a fastball. That was the plan. So then I think you have a couple of different things that you can go to. Maybe even doubling that back up again. Some hitters might say, man, like, I got my one, now I need to get ready for the all-speed pitch because I missed it. Is there a runner in scoring position? And so now they know an all-speed pitch is typically coming. I know there's people that play the percentages there. So, I think ultimately that's where our job as coaches, to help build game plans, to help build tendencies, but then the execution of the pitch ultimately matters from there.
Yeah, another tricky one too is if a batter fouls off straight back and up, some may think he's early, some may think he's hit the wrong part of the bat.
Right.
How do you tell from there?
Yeah, I mean, there for the longest time, I think you heard people talk about, like, the ball going straight back was the one they just missed. I don't necessarily know that that's accurate.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes the ball that just fouled off to the offhand side and it's hit solidly, that's the one where I feel like they just missed it. Like, the timing was just a little bit off, but the barrel was there, like everything was there.
Right.
The timing was just off. So, the one that fouls off just back, like to me, that kind of signifies like you were able to, especially if it was a fastball up and you get the foul ball back, like usually that tells you they're underneath it. And so, you're kind of beating the barrel above it. And so, ultimately probably going to try to stay there until you see some type of an adjustment.
Yeah, I think a lot of people always talk about if a pitch worked, do it again. And I always think at the double A level, I'm always thinking, change, always change, change speeds, always change angles. What do you think about that? Like if a guy had trouble with one pitch, you throw it again, like at double A level, meaning at the lower levels, I would say, yeah, keep feeding him what he can't hit. But
Right.
I think at the double A level and up, I think I was talking to my son in the other episode about this. I think at double A level above, these are good batters. They're going to make the adjustment. So, what have you seen like a difference there?
Yeah, I think honestly, Wayne, I think it's hitter to hitter, and I do think like, in today's game, obviously we know like there's a lot of data out there, and to me, that would be a good instance to be able to use some of that in your game planning of, are you able to double up on this guy? Does he make that adjustment? Some of those things. And so I think that's a piece to it. But you're right. Like you're not going to be able to just continue to go same pitch to same spot as hitters get better. And, ultimately we know the more a hitter sees a pitch in the same spot, the better the hitter ultimately gets. Like numbers will back that up, and our eyes will tell us the same thing too. And so ultimately, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about this, but that's where I think the command of being able to go to different zones, even if it's the same pitch, but changing zones or changing quadrants or whatever,
Oh
ultimately
yeah.
becomes so much important.
Oh, absolutely. And another little trick that Bronson Arroyo was talking about on the show, I never really thought about, was he said that he would work on his bullpens throwing soft, the same pitch, and then work up to throwing it hard. That helped with his command. But then he used that in a game too. So now he has, say, a sinker at 91 and he had a sinker at 83. So he essentially got two pitches out of that. And that was a real way of getting a feel for command too, you know.
Yeah, kind of that plus and minus effect, and
Yeah.
I think you've, that's almost become a lost art a little bit in today's world of throw everything hard. And, I think that's why you've seen kind of the changeup almost disappear, but the guys that have the good changeup still have a lot of success because they can
Oh,
plus
you
and
need
minus.
it. You
And
definitely need it. Yeah. And that's what we're talking about on this show is that I think you need velocity. You need some high velo.
for sure.
Uh, I also think you need command. You need to change speeds. You need movement. And like Brad Osmus said on the show, he said, I want all of it. And me too, you know?
Right. Yeah. Well, we know. I mean, you're not making it to the big leagues without stuff. So we got to have stuff, but at the same time, is it useful stuff? And I know some of your guests have talked about, just making better pitches and different things like that. And some of
Oh,
your,
that's emo. He's one of my best friends. He is awesome. And
yep,
one of the things that he's awesome at is like what you just said. He distills things down into these little phrases that just crystallize what he's getting at. Like instead of making your pitches better, make better pitches. So he's talking about command sequencing, you know?
right. Yeah. So I think, like you said, I mean, you want it all, you need it all, right? Especially as hitters continue to get better. You need multiple weapons. Just having one weapon isn't going to do it. And, so you need it all definitely. And, I think that's where all these things start to come into play.
Yeah, I talked a bit too about character in culture. Dan Hefner was on. He's great for that. And what I was getting at was when I saw like Bochy and Baker winning a World Series with a team that had all the right components, but maybe not the right mixture and culture. And then when they came in, they won, and it brought to mind that character and culture, I think, are also a multiplier. Like I think command is a multiplier of your speed and movement. That if you have better command, it's going to make those pitches better. I think that character and culture are also a multiplier of the team, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's something in minor league baseball. I think you see that maybe that might not be the case. People might think that's not the case. But
I think
ultimately,
from from what Sean had said in the Yankees, it is like he said you'd be hard pressed to find a guy without character in the Yankees. And I think that's by choice and by, how the coaches work with them, how the scouts pick them out.
I think so, and I think inside of that you start to build some of that camaraderie that you're looking for. And sure, everybody has desires and a little bit of that selfish ambition. You have to, but at the same time, like there's a lot of feedback that each player kind of gives each other, and the support that comes with that. And they know that if somebody else starts to have success, they can pick their brain and ultimately try to figure out some things they were doing. So I know in our org, at least, like you see it, and I think it starts all the way with Damon and Lovey and those guys whenever they draft. Like the makeup piece is important, and so I think you see that in our org, and I'm sure many others, but it's definitely something that was seen on the highest level this year in the World Series side of things, where winning still is very important. It's still the most important thing at that level. So I think that definitely starts with a clubhouse.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that too, because I always say that it's as much as I'm into data and using it, uh, I never forget that the best metric, the one we all want, is to win the game. So like win the pitch, win the at bat, win the game. Like sometimes people forget, and I know I've mentioned it many times about Emo talking to a bunch of high school guys, asking them what the job of a pitcher is, and they're screaming out all kinds of other things like high velo and spin rate, and he just wrote on the blackboard OUTS, like get back to what is the real job, the most outs with the least amount of runs and preferably the lowest amount of pitches.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's where, in this game, it's you versus him, the guy in the box and the guy on the mound. And so there's a lot of pieces that come in with it, but it's still, before anything can happen, it's still a one-on-one competition there. And so that definitely matters. And I still think our job as a pitcher ultimately still boils down to is if they can't score, they can't win. And our job is to help prevent them from scoring by getting outs and, making quality pitches.
Command, again, I think is a force multiplier that makes the speeds and movements of your pitches better. And then having command of your movement is key. It's like a feel thing, throwing to a fixed target. I think when guys throw it to a catcher, the catcher moves the mitt, and they don't get a real work on command because a catcher has moved to catch the ball. And with a fixed target like I'm selling, it actually holds them accountable to whether they hit their spot. So, for example, when people first start using my target, they find they really can't hit their spots. They're surprised, and that's because they really haven't practiced hitting their spot. Like if you're a catcher, how many times have you just held the mitt and never moved it? Like,
Right. Yeah. Not very often.
right. And so if a guy's really working on command, you're gonna not have to move your mitt if he's got it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of times you see that, right? Like the catcher ultimately makes us as pitchers feel good, and sometimes you don't realize
Yeah, you don't want to
where
do
the
that.
ball is, right? Like sometimes we even ask the guys, like, where was that pitch? Like, point it out here on the iPad where you think that pitch was, and you'd be shocked on how much some of the guys miss because what they see and what is real are completely different.
Well, that's a great point because when I first started promoting my target, a lot of major league teams was saying we already have a track man, we can know where the ball went. I said, no, but you don't understand. You know where it went. I said, if you ask a guy to throw to, let's say my target, a number 5, right? Without my target, he has to imagine in his mind where number 5 is. So you're testing his ability to know where number 5 is, and then you're testing his ability to hit it. So you're really not testing command. You're only testing his kind of ability to guess where 5 is. And when they use my target for a while, if you tell somebody hit number 7 without the target being there, he actually knows where 7 is. And so we talked about that on an episode before where that creates a language. So if I tell a batter even stand in front of the target, I want you to look for pitches at number 2, to pick a lane, he's going to have better strike zone awareness as well. You know.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, ultimately, the skill acquisition component starts to come in, and we're adding a constraint with your target there that ultimately helps with some of these things. And so, if not, there's a lot of imagery that's happening, and so you don't really know where that is, because ultimately
Yeah,
you can't see what he's thinking. So, there's a very fixed component, there with
yeah.
the target.
Bronson talked about how as a kid he worked going to a target that was cemented into a bucket,
Hmm.
and the idea was the target didn't move. So if he didn't hit in the target, then it held him accountable. And then, like my son Sean, I had made some manual versions that he used for many years, and it was the same thing. He would have to sit at small, like 5x7 target, like they're squares, but I would pick areas or a number, and it had that non-movement of the location where you want to hit, caused them to really develop their command and also let them be able to make adjustments. So let's suppose you miss your target. Well, let's suppose the next pitch, how do you then make the adjustment so you can get that on target? If it's a fixed target, then you could tell the guy, okay, move it over a little bit. He can see the effect when he tries to move it. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a 9-year-old son, and so, trying to just beginning pitching, but not only just pitching for him, but just, ultimately he's an infielder. So being able to throw the ball with accuracy. And so, I mean, we've done things like I've set a chair out there before, and you got to throw it through the opening in the folding chair.
oh,
You know,
I'm glad you said that. I know the coach put my target on first base,
yep.
and they would hit to the infielders, and they have to throw and hit the target for a strike or an area. And it was teaching his infielders, basically command.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, I mean, and that's exactly right. And I got the idea when I was coaching in college at one of the places I coached, like, and I know a couple of your guys have talked about this, but we had a big tractor tire, and they set a tire over there, and you had to throw it through the opening of the tractor tire, and that ultimately was their training of command. And so seeing it from a 9-year-old, that's ultimately just learning skills and how to let the body sequence together and actually throw. And then the simplicity of it with him of, man, just throw it lower. And that naturally we realize how command truly is trained, and it's pretty simple. But sometimes as coaches and players, I think we overcomplicate some of it, with whether it be data or whether it be cueing or whatever. And ultimately, they just need feedback on where the ball went, and then how do I ultimately get it to where I want it to go. And so I think sometimes that's what's needed.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people confuse command and control too. I see that a lot of videos online. And control is just throwing strikes, and command is throwing the ball where you want it, in or out of the zone. And then beyond that, there are levels of command. Like in my target, there are command tests for different levels of play: major league, minor league, college, high school, etc. So that the areas of command are bigger or smaller depending upon the level. And so that way you can have guys work on command for their level. So like a major league guy is going to have a much different level of command than a high school guy.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, one of the things with the command and control aspect is, you're right. For me, control is basically just, getting the ball in the zone and not walking people. To me, that's the simple answer for control. And then with command, like so much of it, and I think you hit on this, is being able to ultimately get to different quadrants in or out of the zone. But also, I think another piece with command that sometimes is left out is, also understanding when you miss, where are you missing, and what is the count?
Absolutely.
And I think the count starts to become a lot bigger factor in that is, do you have a little bit more room for error in certain counts? Is there areas where, if I miss in this count, it's okay, and so I think that's another piece is trying ultimately to let the guy figure out, like, just how big of an area do I need? And ultimately, I think the count plays into how large or how small the area for command needs to be.
Yeah. And in my target, I have you set the size of the command area you want to throw to. and it measures you on that. But you also can pick the good miss area. And so I do that because let's suppose you're working on your sinker down into a righty. You have the area you want to command to, and a good miss is lower than that. A bad miss is above that. If you have a sinker guy missing up, that's not a good miss.
Right.
And so I think teaching that concept is really important, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think, going back to some of the things we talked about with data is we know we want the pitch to have certain movement qualities, and that's good, but you can have these great movement qualities, and we see this a lot, especially at the lower levels, where the movement qualities of a pitch are great, but it's not useful because it's a ball out of hand or it's an automatic take, and so it's a wasted pitch that's thrown. And so ultimately, letting the guys start to figure out, like, if the movement quality is going to be this, then you do have a little bit larger, room, or maybe it's something that because it moves so much, guys aren't going to swing as much, so therefore you
Right.
need to be in the zone more with it, or whatever it might be. But I do think that sometimes, we pigeonhole ourselves so much that we try to go to this little fine area. And that's what I love about some of the things with your target is there are areas for we want to go that are ideal, but there's also areas that there's very limited damage that are done in those areas too. And so the misses in those areas are still positive.
Yeah. And I think the sequence matters too, the setup pitch. I talk often about like to a lefty, a righty throwing a sinker and then a cut fastball in on the hands there. And then one order it works, reverse the order, it gets hit out of the park.
Right.
So, the combination really matters a lot and how you're funneling pitches to set them up. That's why I always say on the show, like as much as I've been involved with data since like what 2016, and the books we wrote on it, I don't really believe that you can have a stuff number on a pitch. Like they do that, but for example, you throw a bullet spin slider really fast, it moves like a cutter. So is it an extreme slider or a bad cutter?
Right.
It's like, well, are you giving a stuff plus as a cutter or a stuff plus really low as a slider? And also, when I had made Pitch Grader, that the original idea was to grade pitches, and I soon found that you really couldn't grade them because looking at the results, the grade of a pitch didn't really matter. It was more the sequence, what came before it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that, you do see things that, going back to some of the things we talked about earlier, like if you're just throwing one pitch in one spot, then ultimately
Yeah,
you don't get the same results as if you were able to throw something. And even if it's just changing the eyes, like that, ultimately it can be something that it changes the eyes, it changes maybe the approach or where they're looking at. And I think you see it like you were talking about with the gyro slider and the cutter, like you see it sometimes too with the sweeper obviously being a newer pitch in baseball. Well, ideally we want to throw the sweeper, down. That's where most people want to throw it. But you do see there are a lot of success for guys who can ride a fastball up that do throw the sweeper up in the top part of the
yeah,
zone. And so, but you're not just going to do that over and over again. Ultimately, that ends up being bad for you. But if you've done something else into that quadrant, or even with a cutter down and away to the same handed hitter, then if you've thrown a fastball out there, well, now all of a sudden that might play on the line of that fastball. And, I know you use the word funneling, and so it might funnel out of that same thing. Now all of a sudden it ends up 3 baseballs further over, and you get your swing and miss.
yeah. So I think the sequence matters a lot, more so than the movement, because for example, Sean was talking about that in 2022. In the first month of the season, he started working on trying to get his numbers. He wanted to have a really great year, and he had really good movement on a sweeper, including I have one video where he throws a sweeper to a lefty. The lefty, you remember that one? He
Yep.
swings at it because he swings through it and it hits him in the family jewels.
Right.
So that's how much that sweeper fooled him. So he was getting enamored with that, but the results weren't happening. So then he went back to, well, not trying to chase great movement. Let's try to hit the right locations. And that's when he went through that run of 10 quality starts and it really took off. So what I like to talk about on the show is like using that data as a guidepost or but not having it be the thing that you chase, I think is really important.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's where, I mean, I think sometimes guys they see it and they want bigger and bigger and bigger, and they, like you said, they almost get enamored with like the actual movement of the pitch. And I think sometimes we know that there can be diminishing returns on certain ends
Yeah,
of movement, and so I think it's smart to try to figure out where those are and ultimately what plays best. But I definitely think what you're saying is accurate for sure.
yeah, because I know when I talk to my son, he's not throwing 98, so he works on trying to miss the sweet spot of the bat, and you do that with not big movement. You want slight movement, just enough to get off the bat, get weak contact, and that plays. You know,
Yeah, well, that's why I think you see like the pairing of when you just start talking about movements, like it gets really difficult because certain movements without certain velocities make it start really early, and so ultimately the hitter sees it forever. And then you see it with sometimes a harder thrown pitch thrown with a little bit shorter movement ultimately plays better because it's short, tight, and late. And we know that at the end of the day, that's still. I was just talking to this about with somebody yesterday, like in the MLB at least, the short, tight, late ultimately plays bigger or better than the bigger
yeah,
and slower break.
absolutely,
And so
absolutely.
that's still where we're trying to go with it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Like, for example, it always surprised me how people will say, like, a guy like Mariano Rivera is like the greatest closer of all time, right? He wasn't a strikeout pitcher.
Right.
He was getting that weak off the sweet of the bat contact and became the greatest closer ever, right? So why aren't they trying to emulate that? Why are they trying to strike everybody out on 5 or 6 pitches? I
Yeah.
never
I
got
mean,
that.
it's definitely a good question. I think I think ultimately we know that swing and miss is it eliminates any possibility, for error. And the run value of that ultimately it will always be zero because you're not putting the ball in play. But I think even more about what you were saying a minute ago is like with bigger is a lot of times bigger leads to less swings also. And so then it
Yeah,
becomes where command is much more important is you may have this big breaking pitch, but you may have zero command or little command of that pitch, and so you can't get that pitch into the zone as much. And there's a reliever in our system right now that has been up and down and done some things, and he has one of the biggest, nastiest breaking sliders around, but hitters just don't swing. And it took him years to figure out that if I can't command this pitch, it's almost useless at the higher levels because hitters won't swing at it. And so I'm not getting the crazy chase that I might have got at lower levels with that pitch.
no, you're 100% correct. Watching going from the GCL to A plus and all that. Then I saw in Double A, started to see a break off where the batter's starting to have a plan and an approach. Then you go to Triple A, and then the major leagues. You can't get away with the things you got away with when you're in GCL. you know, you
Yeah,
know,
no, absolutely. I mean, hitters just continue to get better and they have a plan. And, I think one of the biggest things that was said to me when I was in AAA, in the bullpen role there was, and this is so true, I'll never forget it, but it's hitters are way more comfortable hitting with two strikes. And when they're at the lower levels, it's almost like they're scared to hit with two strikes. So they're so aggressive early in counts that you can get crazy swings and chases. And as hitters get older, they're not afraid of hitting with two strikes. And so they have so much of a better plan and a plan of attack. And I think that's why I like to say personally is you have to be able to win and get misses in zone. If you can't do that, if you can't win in the zone and you're constantly relying on chase out of the zone, then it's not going to work once you hit double A.
no, absolutely. I think I've always said that command is what separates guys at the upper levels. Like everybody's throwing hard. So if you see everyone throwing hard, what makes them different? They have either elite movement that they can do, that they control in the zone, or they have command. And if they have both or all three, high velo with movement and command, then you know they go into the major leagues.
Right. Yeah. Then you start to be Garrett Cole and you start to win Cy Youngs when you can do some of
Yeah.
those things.
Hey, how do you train control? With the tire you described, I've seen at Somerset them using the strings. I've seen that.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I think a lot of that right there, whether it be strings or even some kind of like targeting system or something to ultimately just get some feedback on, was it in the zone? We talked a little bit about the track man, like, I think ultimately just some type of visual is probably use a traffic cone before. I know that's a little bit different, but one of my buddies that's the coach and a big league pitching coach kind of talked a little bit about using a traffic cone or some type of constraint in order to kind of force balls back towards the plate. So kind of the same idea as a string or tire or anything like that.
yeah, I saw Gil Patterson of the A's. He's the minor league coordinator. He was talking about using a traffic cone with a ball on it, and then he would kind of move it over like one ball or two balls or three balls
Right.
to help guys learn to kind of make an adjustment and move over.
Yep. I think it just helps to create and give guys a visual of like seeing a lane that they have available to them or what lane you're wanting them to go to and some of those types of things.
Some things we talked about too is what role do you think mechanics play in command? Like I've seen that the guys who stay in control of their delivery the entire way never look out of control. Like they land in a proper position for fielding or in control. And also when they keep their head still. Those are the kind of things I've noticed guys that what have you seen guys that have good command?
I think this, at least in our org, I think this is where Lovey and those guys in scouting have done such a phenomenal job is ultimately, first off, I think it starts with like being a good athlete, being as athletic as possible because, we know whether it's through biomechanics or whatever, that it's really hard to repeat the delivery over and over again. Like we know there's going to be bandwidths inside of that. So ultimately, we know, and I think this is where again where the skill acquisition stuff comes in is, are we able to solve one problem with multiple solutions? And so I think for us it's trying to be as athletic as possible ultimately with our delivery and be able to handle our body or control our body inside of those movements as many times as possible. And I think that ultimately helps with command.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that too. And then what role do you think mental toughness and focus play? Like I'm a big believer in that mental focus, mental imaging, and things like that are really important
Yeah,
for
I am
command.
too. I think before I came to the Yankees, when I was at Lipscomb University, we did a lot of things with some of this and I did some of my own studies with this. And I think each guy's cognitive ability ultimately is a little bit different. And so I think inside of that then is them trying to figure out like what are their strengths and weakness with the mental toughness and the whether it's focus and distraction, do they have control over that? Do they have impulse control? Like, what are those things? And then ultimately how do you train to make the environment that if you get a guy that gets distracted very easily, well then he needs to be in training sessions where that he's having to focus on things and be able to block out certain things. And especially playing in New York, I mean, that's a big thing. Like you're going to go play in New York, then you better have some of the ability and some of that makeup to be able to control and handle pressure and kind of control and ask for the big moments. And, I know you saw, Jordan Montgomery talk a little bit about it. Like you get in the playoffs naturally, you need to be able to raise your level a little bit. And ultimately that's what you're doing. But if you've never trained to do that, then, you're kind of in fighting a losing battle there, I guess is probably a good way to say it.
Yeah. Well, what are some examples of how you would train that?
I think you can do things like I mean, we've done, music pins where you cut the music up really loud and try to create distractions. I've had uh I've had guys or people in the past like waving things behind the catcher to try to break out visual differences to where the focus has to be on whatever that starting place is. I think anything like calling time right in the middle of a guy about to start his windup, call time and make him stop just like a hitter. Ask to change balls after every so many pitches and like a foul ball happens. So they, just try to put them as close to competition as possible. Anything that could possibly happen, anything that could break that focus and distraction. Using time between pitches. I think now with our pitch clock, that's a whole nother thing where we have to be really cognizant on in our training environment is, are you mimicking a pitch clock? Are you throwing pitches in a certain amount of time, or is every pitch you're throwing at 45 50 seconds when then you're going to get to a game and you got to throw them in 18 seconds? And so that's something that I think has to be taken in consideration as well.
Yeah. I know my son uh, does accounting in his head before the pitches
Yep.
and picks a number so that he's never going to be going at the same time.
Right.
Try to mix that up. Those are all little skills that, again, you have to put all those together as a pitcher to have success, and not just throwing 98.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's more to it, right? And we know that. And, I think this is probably one of the biggest games where I think if you went around and polled people, you would find out that people would give you much more answers on the game's way more mental than it is physical. But we spend all this time just working on the physical aspects of the game, and we don't ever even talk about the mental aspects that come along with it and techniques and skills to help them with that. And so obviously with us, we have a mental skills department and those guys do a great job. And, so I think that's where the collaboration with them and making sure that they're understanding what we're seeing and, vice versa and us working together ultimately help with that.
Yeah, the Yankees have an awesome guy.
Chris
My son,
Passarella is who
what?
Chris Passarella is our
Yeah,
guy in the minor league side on the upper levels. And so, yeah, Chris does a great job working with the guys and, you know, comes out just to watch bullpens, just to try to pick up on little things that he might see and, always ask for feedback from us. And so, yeah, those guys do a great job.
yeah. I know my son. His fishing buddy in Tampa
Oh
is
yeah.
the
Yeah,
yeah.
Noel's a fishing guy for sure.
Yeah. So him and Sean have always got fishing. It's like you couldn't pick a better fishing buddy, the mental
That's right.
skills guy.
That's right.
Yeah. I think also I talk about a lot. One of the bigger things I've noticed too is that it's important for a pitcher to know who you are. So if you got a power pitcher and then you've got, say, a finesse pitcher or a command pitcher, if they try to mimic each other's styles, they're not going to have a lot of success. They have to focus on what were they drafted for? What do they do well? Do it very well. And then you can add on some other things, but you got to stay true to what your style is, I think. How do you
Yeah,
feel
I
about
think I definitely think that like understanding who you are, your strengths that make you who you are, and I think that's where, we haven't talked much about Sam Breen, but I know he was on here with you and, you
it? He's
know,
awesome.
our success starts with Sam for 100% sure. And so I think that, for him, it's ultimately getting these guys as soon as they're drafted and kind of identifying these things, but not him identifying them for them, but ultimately helping the player identify that for themselves, because ultimately we can tell them that, but it's what they believe and what they see is ultimately what they're going to fall back on. And so I think as guys start to develop that at the lower levels, they start to get a better kind of understanding of, man, these are my strengths, this is who I am. Then it ultimately always gives them a fallback plan on when in doubt, when the situation's tough, here's who I am, here's what makes me, who I am. And so I think that ultimately always gives you some type of game plan, even if you don't have one.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be able to trust that person. Like, for example, Sean was talking about the time when I told him in uh, 2020 that he needs to develop a cut fastball based upon his pitches and what they're moving. He needs a cut fastball for lefties. All right. And he said, well, I have to do what my boss says now. Let's work on it in the off season. And then Sam, like 2 weeks later, came up to told him, uh, have you ever thought about developing a cut fastball? And he said, he's laughing. He says, my old man just told me that, 2 weeks ago. And so that gave Sean the confidence to say, well, here are two guys that I respect their opinions. Maybe I should really get back to developing a cut fastball. And he did. And he had great success with that. But that's an example of a guy like Sam. If you're respected enough, these players will listen to you and you can affect change that maybe they would not normally do because it's their career. And if they make a change and they're messed up, they could be out of a career.
Yep. Well, and I think that's where, we always want to know kind of what are we solving for, what are we doing? Why is that needed? And ultimately, like, it's having conversation with our players and trying to meet them where they are. And, I think as those relationships are built and some of those things are formed, you start to learn those guys and they start to learn you. And, I think ultimately in our system, at least, and that's all I can really talk about, but in our system, it's, man, it's, I believe all of our players would say, I mean, it's an open door policy. Like we want feedback. We want them to have feedback. And that's where, we do a lot of things in our meetings. And I know personally, when I have our meetings with our guys, like post outings or whatever, like I start every meeting off with like, hey, what do you got? I want to hear what they say first and kind of see where they're at. And because ultimately, and I know some people like this saying and some people don't, but it's their career. And so we just want to make sure that we're pulling on that rope together on the same way. And, that's where I think the coach can help. But like you said, carefully, because if not, then, you definitely can, do harm as well. And so I think that's where building that relationship in the beginning and having them to understand that, hey, we're pulling on this rope together. And ultimately it's how do we continue to improve you so we can make you into an above average big leaguer to ultimately help our team in the Bronx?
Yeah, that's very important because they gotta trust you.
For sure.
You know. Uh, how would you describe a complete pitcher? Like, what would a guy who is a complete pitcher? What qualities would you say he has?
I think it would be for me the simplest way to say it is probably the ability to execute multiple pitches into multiple locations. And so I think for me, I mean, that obviously can go off into a lot of different rabbit holes, but like I said, in simplest form, I think that's it for me. I think if you can only throw that one pitch to one spot, as you said, with hitters starting to get better, like ultimately, I don't think you're a complete pitcher. But being able to execute multiple pitches into those multiple locations, for me, that makes you a complete pitcher from a physical aspect. And then I think from the mental aspect is, knowing who you are. Like you said, you started with that a minute ago, and knowing who you are, knowing what your strengths are, and ultimately, having a plan that you are completely 100% convicted to before you make that pitch.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because that's kind of the essence of what I'm talking about in the show, where there's a lot of slang in baseball. So when I say command and you say command, some people say executing pitches, locating, quality strikes. They have all these terms around command. I think a lot of people forget what command is.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that's the case. And I think you said it earlier, and I think it just kind of continues to be the case is people talk about command and they're really mentioning control. And I just think it's a lack of understanding of the difference in the two.
Yeah. The other thing that is interesting, like Sean had Tommy John, what, 5 something months ago. He's back to throwing, and I gave him a new command tracker target, and he's been using it, throwing like 55, 60. I think he may be up to 70 now, and just trying to control it. It's using it in a way that he was asking me, do I really need to work on throwing strikes down? I said, well, yes, because if your mechanics are off, you're not going to be able to throw strikes. So that's going to be your first indication that your mechanics are not right and you should work on them. So what do you think about that? Like using a fixed target to say, well, if you can't at least control, maybe your mechanics are not right and you need to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, and I talk to our guys about this a lot, like I don't know why you would ever throw a pitch and not have some type of fixed target that you're working towards.
Oh,
Because
thank you. Now you're my best friend because uh I from day one working with Sean, to me was like everything he threw was to a target.
right,
It was either the target with the little squares, or we had a wall that had a strike zone target on. He would throw to that target. It would have to hit a strike. It would bounce all kind of crazy ways. He'd have to field it. Then he'd have to throw to another target on first. So it was always, if you're going to throw to a target. I love that.
yeah. Well, and I think one of our big league pitchers says it all the time, and it's just basically it's you only get so many throws off of the mound, as a pitcher, but that still doesn't mean that we can't train into certain aspects of pitching in what we're doing. And I think it's probably just deliberate practice. And so, I know one of the things that I've been really focused on, and I actually track what we do for practice on a daily basis while we're at the affiliate. And so a lot of that for me is just to see what the deliberate practice that we're doing, or are we just going out there and, for lack of better words, kind of just punching the time clock and getting our work in, but are we really working on something? And so I think that's where it comes down to throwing to a target. Like, at the end of the day, if I'm throwing to a fixed target, then I'm working on my command, even if it's just playing catch. And so, whether it's a target, whether it's picking out body parts, like there's so many different ways that we can do this. And so I think if you have a target, then use it. That's something we always want to do. And I think ultimately that it definitely isn't going to hurt you, is the way I like to say it. Like, why wouldn't you do something that we know is not going to hurt you and probably is going to help you?
Absolutely. A quality catch play is huge. Like, for example, if you throw the torso, it's the width of the plate roughly. If you're throwing between, let's say, the knees and, you know, in the middle between the letters, you're basically throwing to control. So just playing catch, they can work on control. Now, like you said, if you pick body parts, shoulder, knee, left knee, right knee, you can actually start working on command while you're playing catch.
That's right. And then, then you can, I know, like I said, I know there's a lot of our big league guys talk about it often. Like, you start seeing balls that get outside of the frame. Well, that's a ball. Like, and so no matter if you're at 60 feet or if you're at 120 feet or you're at 200 feet, the goal should be to keep every ball inside the frame. And then ultimately, as you work your way in, now you want to go from control to command. So I want to start working on different body parts. And so there's just, again, it's just deliberacy with what you're doing and making sure that there's an intent to get better in every ball that's thrown.
Yeah, I do think there's a time to air it out
For
so you
sure.
can work on velo. I think there's another time where you get the track man out and you start working on your spin and your movements. And then I think command really ought to be separate from those so that you're not trying to do too many things at once in a training session, so that you're working on command separately. Now, then before a game, Sean was describing how he would use TrackMan a little differently, where instead of chasing the movement that he was trying in the pregame bullpen, he started just trying to use it as a gauge for how his movement is moving that day. So instead of chasing, a number like I want 21, he was just using it and say, all right, this is what 18 feels like. And then when he's in a game, goes into the game, he kind of knows where his pitchers are going to be moving to, so he can command them.
Yep. Well, and I know a lot of people have said this, but Derek Johnson with the Reds was one of the first people that said it that I heard it. But you can't.
Derek is all I know. Derek's a friend of mine. He's awesome.
Okay. Yeah. No, and it's like you can't be over the mound or over the rubber and over the plate at the same time. And so you have to kind of choose. And ultimately we know with command, and that's one of the ways that I like to train command, is you need a consistency or some sort of tightened bandwidth of the movements first. And then as you start to identify that, then ultimately then finding your starting points of, all right, this is the movement that I have, where do I need it to be? So I think what Sean's talking about is exactly right. And And the thing is day to day, that's going to change a little bit, you know,
Yeah.
and being able to understand, like, all right, here's what I have today. Here's the lines that I'm working with today. And that might change inning to inning, you know, and so it's finding out, man, what are my lines here? Like, where am I at? What am I feeling with those lines? Like, and that's where I think using the data in a very constructive way there can be very helpful. But you're not just chasing a number, because there's more to that number than just like one holistic approach of that number tells you it's going to be good. There's a lot of things that goes along with that.
Yeah, because you got to command it. You can't even control it, let alone command it. It don't matter what kind of movement it has, you know.
That's right.
You know, I know Sean talked about having his release point and have his end point. And in his mind, he would picture like a donut or a ring in between the two. And knowing his movement, he would try to throw to that ring to have it come back around and hit the target. That's one method. What other methods have you seen guys employ?
I like to use the analogy of it's kind of like you're playing golf, and you know, you watch, if I go out to the golf course and I'm playing with Tiger Woods, well, our ideas of getting to that result are obviously going to be completely different. And I think that's the level of pitcher as well. Like, if I'm training my son, then ultimately we're going to throw to this big area and just hope we hit it. But if I'm
Yeah,
training one of our guys in Somerset or higher, then ultimately we want it to start here, know the break's going to do this, it's going to end here, so therefore we leave ourselves this putt, you know. And so I try to put it into like a golf analogy, and think about, like, if one of those guys hit an approach shot to the green, they know what the slope of the green is, they know where they want it to hit, because ultimately if they come in at that angle, then the ball's going to end up over here. And so that's the level of command and expertise I think we're trying to get to with our pitches, is thinking about the shape. We want to shape our pitch, yes, but then ultimately, where do we need to start our pitch in order to get it to end over here into the quadrants or into the zones that we're looking for?
no, that's a great point. I remember when Wes Johnson was at DBU, you know, and he came to see Sean throw a bullpen. He flew out just for the afternoon, and Sean was throwing a bullpen. And he was throwing a changeup, and he kept missing down. Same thing, down, down, down. And so Wes asked him, "What are you aiming for?" He said, "Well, the glove." He said, "Well, aim for the top of his mask." And he did that. And after that, every pitch was boom, 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 hit the spot. And I think that was the moment where Wes said, "All right, I got some guy I can work with now." And that's why Sean wound up going to DBU. So again, picking the point where either picking a ring that you throw through and have the movement carry to the target, or picking some location as like that's where we're aiming for, and I know that it's going to carry my ball to uh, another point on the target.
Right. Well, and I think, as we were talking about with extreme movements, and whether it's a sinker or whether it's the sweeper or whatever, it's, we know the plate's 17 inches, but we know if my sinker's moving 18 inches arm side, well, if I'm throwing that, starting it on the outer third, it's not ending up on the plate. Like, we know that it's not possible. And so whether it's actually laying out a ruler, which I've done before, and show them like, hey, just how much movement that really is and where that means you need to start it. Another way I've gone about it is, you know, taking baseballs and laying them out of like, all right, like, here's what 18 inches of movement looks like on number of balls. So you need to start this 2 balls off the plate inside. Like, just trying to give them different visuals of, and to put that actual number of how many inches of movement that we're getting, put that into a visual form of, hey, here's what that movement actually looks like now that you're talking about you're starting an ending point on the plate or off of the plate.
Yeah, and you still have to be wary of combining pitches because guys will lay off. If you do that too often, right? Guys will good batters will pick a lane and figure that if the ball's in its lane, that's a slider. I'm laying off it.
Yep.
So to counter that, you have to now throw other pitches in that same lane so they don't know, is that the slider coming in? It's going to go off the plate, or is now the sinker,
Right.
right? Like what kind of combinations do you wind up combining to avoid that kind of lane mentality a batter might have?
Yeah, you know I can think about one of our guys that, you know, was struggling to get slide or miss on his sweeper. Like, they just either weren't chasing it, or when he threw it on the plate. Obviously, they didn't miss it because they were able to kind of see the only pitch in that lane. And then all of a sudden, he starts throwing a sinker to his glove side, whereas he only used to throw it to the arm side. Well, now all of a sudden, there was 2 pitches out of that same lane, and then all of a sudden, the chase starts to increase on the slider, and it really didn't have anything to do with the shape of the slider or even execution of
Right.
the slider. It was just
Exactly.
it was getting the sinker into that same lane. So, I think that's it. Or even if it's maybe the slider's not getting the miss that you want, and so all of a sudden you just throw that fastball low and away instead of always throwing the fastball up. Well, now all of a sudden you just show something else hard down, and now they have to respect that everything down might not just be a slider. So there's a lot of different ways I think of going about it and getting that, but I think definitely being able to find pitches in that funnel or tunnel, and being able to kind of show different speeds both up and down ultimately helps hitters from being able to eliminate it.
Yeah, that's the point I was making about people putting a stuff plus number on a pitch. It's like, well, uh, it depends what was thrown before it, or what you're setting up next. And so, I think when they give heat maps to the guys you see in the hat, you guys give them to them the hat, and looking at the heat map for the batter, it's like, well, that's heat map for all the sliders for the last 30 at bats, or maybe 15 at bats. Like, well, is it really the heat map for the sliders following a sinker? Because that would have a much different result than sliders following maybe a changeup or some other pitch,
Right.
And then
Yeah, no,
and
absolutely.
then location matters too. Where was the previous location?
Right. Well, then I think that goes all the way back to where we were at earlier of, like, really having them understand and pay attention to maybe not what I wanted to do, but what actually happened. What actually happened with the pitch? How did the hitter react? And then taking that moment to kind of think about, all right, like, what is the plan for this hitter? How are we trying to approach him? And then what inside of what I do well, and that goes back to kind of knowing yourself, what inside of
Yeah,
knowing myself am I able to do then to exploit that next?
yeah, yeah. And I think the core thing from that is, of course, know you are, but uh, reading the batter, because you may have a plan, pre-planned attack for that batter, but knowing what to throw, when to throw, based upon what you're seeing at that moment is an art that has to get developed with experience playing. I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the more these guys do it, and the more they just start to identify, and I think you said it, and I think it's definitely becomes more noticeable. Once you hit double A, especially into triple A, hitters start to get a little bit better plan, and so that's where you start to incorporate much more of a game plan, because those guys have a much more detailed game plan as well. And so I think that's where, there's a little bit more of that coming into play,
Yeah.
especially for a
So
starting pitcher.
yeah, so you've got your work cut out for you, but I saw you did a great job this year. So
Well, I
you did
appreciate it.
really
We had
well.
a lot of really good pitchers too. So a lot of
Well,
times,
they had a good coach too. So
well, I appreciate it.
at the end of the show, I show a list of the 9 things that I think are important for a pitcher. I think if you had all of them, you'd be like a Hall of Fame guy. So I'm going to show you that list, and I'll read them off so the guys listening can know what they are. And if you would please pick your top 4, and again, I know you would want all of them. Like Brad Ausmus said the other on his show, it's like I want it all. I get that. So, but if you couldn't have it all, what would be your top 4? Okay, and the top qualities are character, command, changing speeds, movement, max velocity, sequencing, reading batters, mental toughness, and know who you are.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's the easy answer is all of the above. But I think for me, um, I would probably have to go with, command. I think command, to me, command is ultimately execution also, which we've talked a little bit about. So I think command, is there. Also, I still would say max velocity, because I do think that having that, is important at the highest level. I would say reading batters. That's probably the catcher coming out in me, but I would say reading batters. And then I would say, movement for me would probably be the next thing. I would definitely say going back and forth there between sequencing and reading batters, but I do think some of these overlap into each other a little bit, but I definitely I would go with those four.
Yeah, they definitely kind of overlap. Like knowing who you are, helps you know what to develop, what's your, your strengths or things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think like I said, I think a lot of these things are, as you said, the right answer is you want them all.
Yeah.
But I think for me, those four probably go together the best.
Well, Grayson, I thank you so much for coming on the show. It's like every show I'm learning a little bit more and more. So I'm actually learning as I watch these myself.
Yeah, Wayne, I appreciate it, man. Like I told you, but when you asked me to do this, I've watched majority of these already and kind of try to pick up little pieces from each one of them as well. So thanks for what you're doing, for us in the game, and definitely appreciate you having me on.
Oh, I appreciate it. Hey, have a great day.
All right, you too. Thanks, Wayne. See you.
Don't forget to hit subscribe to get notified when new episodes are released. Pitching Command Show, brought to you by Command Trakker, the smart target that MLB and D1 teams rely upon to measure and train command. Many throw hard, but few command. Visit commandtrakker.com.